The slap arrived quicker than the music could die. My glasses, tortoiseshell frames with a tiny crack near the hinge, shot off my face and clattered across the maple wood floor of the Maple Harbor Community Hall. One lens skittered under the dessert table, stopping against a tiered platter of lemon bars dusted with powdered sugar. 130 people turned into statues. Raised champagne flutes froze mid-air. A child in patent shoes stopped chewing a jelly bean. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hesitate. Heat bloomed inside my cheek, but the colder pain came from the space where my son's voice should have been. Camilla's veil trembled with her breath. "That's what you get for gripping those keys like a dragon," she said, not even bothering to lower her microphone. "A woman your age doesn't need a two-bedroom with an ocean view." Her bouquet, white ranunculus bound with silk ribbon, brushed my shoulder as she stepped past me, smoothing a wrinkle on her gown with the same care she never gave to her words. A murmur rippled across the hall, the kind that pretends to be concern and smells of buttercream and gossip. I crouched to search the floor with watering eyes, palms skimming splinters and glitter. Red rose petals clung to my skirt. I found the frames but not the lens, so the world tilted and doubled, the way it does on the deck of a boat. Raphael stood beside the DJ table, tie loosened, jaw slack. His gaze avoided me with practiced precision, the way a man steps around a puddle. He adjusted his cufflinks as if they were a shield. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to his mother. "Let's keep the night positive," he told the DJ, voice crawling into the microphone. Back to the playlist. The opening chords of At Last exploded through the speakers like a cruel joke. I rose, slowly, as befits a 71-year-old who has learned the body's small negotiations, and tasted copper. Two cousins whispered near the punch bowl. A teenager filmed with her phone angled just right to catch my ruin and the cake topper, which showed a miniature bride pulling a miniature groom by his tie. The pianist looked at his sheet music as if it might spell rescue. Camilla angled toward me again, teeth bared in a bridal smile. "You're not welcome in our home while you hoard that apartment," she said, voice bright as a sales flyer. "Raphael and I need a place to start our life. Yours will do." The vein at my temple throbbed. I pressed 2 fingers there and felt the old pulse of someone who has been patient past the statute of limitations. For 2 years I had endured her comments about my cardigan, vintage in the worst way, my car, that sedan belongs at a museum, my schedule at the library. "Isn't it time to rest, Lydia?" Tonight, without warning, I felt something uncoil inside me, slow and certain as a rope dropped from a height. I did not argue. The hall smelled of coffee and lilies. The candles smoked black ropes against the ceiling. I walked past the gift table with its nest of tissue paper and the guest book where someone had drawn a heart around Rafa and Kami. I walked past the sheriff's deputy who had been invited because he was Raphael's softball buddy and now stared at his shoes. I walked through the double doors into the September night. Outside, the harbor lifted its briny breath. Gulls complained from the pier. The town clock on Ash Street chimed 9, each note peeling the evening in tidy strips. I sat in my old blue sedan, paint faded to the precise color of an overwashed sky, and pulled out a phone with a chipped case that once held a photo of Miguel. My thumb found the number without asking my mind's permission. "Silas," I said when the line clicked. "It's Lydia. Come to the community hall. Bring the folder labeled Harbor Light. Everything inside." His voice tightened. Now. Now. This won't wait for morning." He hesitated only long enough for respect. 15 minutes. My hands found my knees and stayed there like loyal dogs. In the passenger seat, a knitted hat I'd finished that morning for the library's winter drive slumped open-mouthed. A flyer for the church bake sale stuck to my heel as I shifted. I breathed with the metronome tick of the car's old clock and let memory roll through like fog that knows the coastline better than any map. 2.5 years earlier, Raphael had introduced Camilla in my kitchen while a pot of black beans simmered and a kettle clicked off. The first thing she did was open the cupboard and, without asking, shuffle my mugs into color order. Organization is love, she said, smiling the way you smile at a dog you intend to train out of jumping. She called my place cozy with a delicate curve on the word that meant cramped. Her fingers stroked the windowsill, not for dust, but for potential. When Raphael went to the bathroom, she stood on my balcony and stared at the harbor. Her eyes did math. I stood behind her and counted the gulls. Weeks later, Mr. Doyle, 3 doors down, retired mail carrier with a whistle that could pierce fog, tapped my door with his knuckles. "Your son's gal brought a man with a laser measurer," he said, eyebrows marching. "He walked your hallway like it owed him rent." I had smiled then, the way women smile when we file rather than fight. I folded the smile into a drawer with the warranties and told myself I was imagining. Inside the car, I pressed the cold of my wedding band against my cheek. Miguel's ring had rested in a velvet box for 9 years. Mine stayed on as a spine. He used to say, "Visible wealth is bait, invisible wealth is ballast." We had chosen ballast. Coupon, casseroles, black coffee in a chipped mug. Behind the curtain, deeds, dividends, a little building on Dock Street with 3 dentists and a tailor, and a house on the spit we never got around to restoring. For 3 years, while Raphael's voice fluttered with optimism and his texts arrived with dollar amounts disguised as emergencies, I had wired money to the holes of his life. Late rent became handled. A car payment transformed into a surprise refund. A wedding deposit materialized with the grace of a fairy grandmother I had vowed never to become. I had believed in tides returning. I had believed in his shame arriving sooner than his requests. Belief, I learned, is not the same as boundary. Headlights slid into the lot and stopped beside my sedan. The driver's door opened on a man with snow-white hair and a coat that never wrinkled. Dr. Silas Bennett kept his briefcase tucked to his ribs as if it contained a heartbeat. He leaned in my window. "Do we go in, or do we burn the town down from here?" "We go in," I said, "but first I need a favor." He waited, one brow lifted. "Joseph Doyle," I said, "apartment 3B. If he's home, ask him for the brown folder in the second drawer of my desk. Tell him it's time." Silas nodded, already dialing. While he spoke to Doyle, the harbor blew another cold breath across the parking lot. The moon lifted like a coin a child finds and keeps secret in her pocket. I saw my reflection in the glass. A woman with a slapped cheek, a missing lens, a spine straightened by rage that learned manners. When Silas ended the call, he held my gaze. "You know, once we start, nothing returns to its box. Boxes are for people who like moths," I said. "I prefer air." He smiled then, the first time I'd seen him do it since Miguel's funeral. "Let's retrieve your air." We waited 5 minutes. Mr. Doyle arrived at a shuffle-quick pace in his fisherman's sweater, breath fogging, the brown folder clutched like a newborn. The folder had a crease from 2009 when I'd slammed a drawer in a storm. "Saw the slap," he said, face rough with sorrow. "Heard the silence after. I brought the folder, and I brought this." He handed me my missing lens, caught in the sole of his shoe. "You always said I had an eye for lost items." I fitted the lens back into the frame. It held with a click that sounded like a decision. Through whole glasses, the world returned with edges. Silas flipped the folder open on the hood of his car. The parking lot single lamp turned the papers, sepia, first page, a ledger of transfers, $4,500 each month, my handwriting neat, dates and notes circled with patient shame. Second, the guarantor agreement for Raphael's lease. Third, the ballroom's payment guarantee, $53,000 and change, my name typed, my signature small as a hair. The rest, property deeds, a letter to my future self, a new will sealed with navy ribbon. Silas tapped the ribbon with a knuckle. "If we enact this tonight, there's no unringing." "I brought the clapper," I said. "Let's ring." Before we moved, I pressed my palms to the folder and allowed exactly one tear to fall. Not for spectacle, but for burial. I buried the version of me who folded and smoothed and avoided. I whispered a benediction for her. She had survived long enough to deliver me here. We walked toward the double doors. Music swelled again. Someone had switched to a playlist of coastal classics. The wood steps creaked the way they had during pancake breakfasts and school fundraisers. I had once danced on this floor barefoot at a community potluck while Miguel clapped in rhythm. History does not rescue you. It only witnesses. The doors swung open. Air conditioning kissed my cheek and raised gooseflesh on my arms. Heads turned. Forks paused. The sheriff's deputy looked relieved, as if an adult had arrived to break up a childish scuffle. Camilla's veil caught on a chair and snapped free with a sound like paper tearing. Silas's voice found its courtroom volume without the courtroom. "Good evening," he said into the microphone. The DJ didn't mean to hand him, but did. "My name is Dr. Silas Bennett, attorney for Ms. Lydia Avila. I apologize for interrupting your celebration, but there are urgent financial matters regarding Mr. Rafael Avila and Ms. Camilla Brooks that must be addressed now." Camilla laughed too brightly. "Lydia, you're embarrassing yourself. Put away your papers." She tried to pat my hand and met air. Rafael finally stepped forward, color drained to the hue of uncooked dough. "Mom, what are you doing?" "I'm returning what I should never have given," I said. "The comfort of pretending there are no consequences." Silas drew the first document. He read with the clean edge of a scalpel. "Effective immediately, Ms. Avila revokes her personal guarantee on the residential lease at 14 Ash Street, Unit 2C. Notice will be sent to the landlord at 8 a.m. tomorrow. You have 30 days to secure a new guarantor or vacate." Raphael's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at his hands as if they might produce a solution, the way a magician produces a dove. They produced only tremor. "Second," Silas continued, "all monthly transfers from Miss Avila's accounts to Mr. Avila's accounts are suspended as of tonight. Records reflect $4,500 per month over 36 months, totaling $162,000 used for rent, credit cards, insurance, and wedding deposits." A gasp moved through the hall, a single organism inhaling. Camilla's mother's pearls seemed to tighten around her throat. The DJ turned the volume down until the dance floor held only breath and the soft panic of shoes adjusting. "Third," Silas said, eyes steady, "the guarantee provided to this venue for tonight's event is rescinded. Payment must be presented in full according to the contract terms before services continue." A fork slipped from someone's hand. It struck a plate with a bell tone and spun like a compass that finally found north. Camilla lunged toward the microphone. "You can't do this. Look at her. She's confused." Everyone saw her outburst. "She needs assisted living, not legal documents." "Everyone saw a slap," Mr. Doyle said from the doorway, voice rough as rope, "and they saw who delivered it." Silas shifted the papers. "If those present intend to submit statements," he said, "I suggest they include all actions, not only the ones convenient to a narrative." He looked at me then, not asking, only letting me choose. I stepped forward. My voice arrived without wobble. "For 3 years," I said, "I deposited the money that kept your lights glowing and your car insured and your refrigerator humming. While you planned a wedding you couldn't afford, the deposit cleared because my account bled. I did this quietly because I believed love in private would bloom into gratitude in public." I let the words hang beside the bunting and the rented chandeliers. Across the room, the cake's sugar flowers leaned, melting at the edges. Raphael stared at the floorboards, as if an answer might be carved there with his initials from 8th grade. Nothing answered. A boy in a bow tie whispered too loudly, "Is this part of the program?" His mother squeezed his shoulder. Weddings sculpt us into witnesses we hadn't trained to be. Camilla's breath hitched. She's making up numbers. She tugged her veil, not gently. No one with that car has that kind of money. People with ballast don't advertise, I said. We prefer not to drown. The ballroom manager, Mr. Pritchard, a man with a ledger-shaped spine, appeared near the kitchen door, paper in hand. His eyes skimmed the document Silas offered. He looked at the newlyweds with a face a teacher reserves for students who insist the dog ate the final project. We will need a card at the desk, he said softly, almost kindly, or the evening ends here. A tide shifted then, not in the harbor, but in Raphael's face. He looked at me, and for a heartbeat, I recognized the boy who used to crouch at the shoreline with a broken plastic boat and ask if I could make the sea behave. His mouth formed the beginning of mom, the syllable a blister. Before he could shape a second, a voice rose from the back, a woman's voice I knew as well as my own heartbeat. Lydia, Maya called, weaving past a table of firefighters and a cluster of Camilla's college friends in identical nude heels. Her hair had escaped its barrette, her cheeks flushed from running. She reached us and pressed a folded packet into my palm. Don't let go of that mic, she said, eyes burning. They've got a plan B. The hall went utterly still again, but it was not the stillness of shock now. It was the stillness right before a wave lifts taller than anyone expected. I closed my fingers around the packet and felt the edges. A lawyer's letterhead, screenshots, dates circled in red. I looked up at Silas. He understood before I spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, replacing one document with another, there's more that must be read. The chandeliers hummed. The cake leaned a fraction more. Camilla's mascara trembled at the corner of one eye, a dark bead considering the leap. Raphael swallowed hard enough for the microphone to pick it up, an accidental percussion. Keep the music off, I said to the DJ, not unkindly. This part requires listening. And then I squared my shoulders, the same shoulders that had carried laundry baskets up 3 flights and held sleeping fevers through long nights, and prepared to open the packet in my hand. The envelope Maya pressed into my palm was damp with the heat of her hand. My niece's voice still echoed in my ear. They've got a plan B. I unfolded the packet as carefully as a surgeon opening skin. 3 pages. A lawyer's letterhead I didn't recognize. Sworn statements from witnesses I knew only as faces from the community. Mrs. Portman from the hardware store. Young Daniel who bagged groceries at Harbor Mart. Each affidavit painted me as an elderly woman unraveling, unstable, vindictive, irrational. A final draft petition for guardianship, with Raphael's name printed neatly as petitioner. Camilla leaned toward the microphone, her veil trembling like fishing net in a storm. That paperwork is nonsense, she hissed. My mother's cousin is a lawyer. She said we needed to be prepared in case Lydia lost her faculties. It's just contingency. Maya spoke before I could. Prepared? You mean you've been stockpiling lies? You've been rehearsing a performance to steal her home? Her voice cracked in righteous fury, the kind that reminded me of her mother when she was a girl. The room bristled. Guests whispered like wind combing tall grass. Phones rose discreetly, their red dots blinking as evidence multiplied. Mr. Pritchard, the hall manager, shifted his weight with the discomfort of a man watching his balance sheet catch fire. Dr. Bennett lifted the packet. His courtroom timbre sliced the air. This document seeks to establish guardianship over Ms. Lydia Avila on grounds of incompetency. If granted, her assets, her properties, even her daily choices would fall under control of her son. Let me be clear. This is an attempt at dispossession disguised as filial duty. Raphael blanched. His tie sagged like a defeated flag. It wasn't my idea, he muttered, but the microphone caught him. Camilla said, "Don't you dare," she snapped, but her voice cracked too. I stepped forward, letting the microphone find me. 3 years, I began, the words weighted with iron. 3 years I sent money you thought came from chance. Refunds, bonuses, windfalls. No. They came from me. They came because I believed a son eventually remembers what his mother taught him about work and honesty. A murmur swelled, this time not just shock, but indignation. Someone clapped once, then stopped, ashamed of breaking the spell. I opened the folder Silas had brought from my desk. Paper edges whispered like wings. Here, I said, holding up a bank transfer slip dated last winter. $4,500. Note field, car payment resolved. Here another, rent arrears handled. I scattered them on the dessert table where they mingled with sugar and crumbs. For 36 months, I was the tide that kept your boat from sinking. Tonight, that tide goes out, and you will learn what it is to stand on dry sand. Camilla lunged. She's lying. Look at her clothes. Look at her car. She lives like a pauper. Silas's smile was surgical. Appearances, Mrs. Brooks, are not assets. Deeds are. He held aloft the title to the Dock Street building, the beach cabin, the investment account summaries. Numbers and signatures glimmered under chandelier light. The collective intake of breath this time was sharp, almost envious. Women clutched their pearls tighter. Men cleared throats, disguising astonishment. Raphael swayed. His hand rose toward me, stopped midair, fell again. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, forgetting the microphone, forgetting the 130 ears. "All this time, why hide it?" "Because money changes people," I said simply. "It changed you without even knowing it existed." Silence pressed heavy. In the back, a toddler began to cry, as if punctuating the truth. Mr. Pritchard stepped forward, adjusting his ledger. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "as of this moment, the financial guarantee for tonight's event has been revoked. Payment of $53,000 must be settled immediately, or I am contractually obligated to suspend services and request guests to leave." The words cracked across the hall like thunder. The band stopped mid-tune. Servers froze with trays of champagne flutes. Guests shuffled uncomfortably in their chairs. The illusion of celebration sagged like the melting cake. Camilla's voice rose in a pitch that scraped nerves. "This is extortion. She's ruining our wedding out of spite." "Spite?" My laughter was bitter, salt water on a fresh wound. "Spite is what you spat at me when you slapped my face for refusing to hand over my keys. Justice is what you witness now." Phones filmed from every angle. Somewhere a flash popped. Raphael dropped to a chair, head in his hands. He looked like a man watching his own reflection drown. "Mom, please," he whispered, but microphones don't protect whispers. The entire hall heard, "Please don't do this. There are people here. Memories." I steadied my voice, low and certain. "Memories can survive truth. They cannot survive lies." Maya's hand squeezed mine. Her grip reminded me I wasn't alone. Not tonight. Not anymore. Dr. Bennett snapped the folder shut. "All revocations and suspensions have been signed and notarized. They are binding as of this moment." He placed the folder gently on the podium, like a gavel falling. Guests rose in murmuring waves. Some slipped out the side doors, unwilling to witness more. Others leaned forward, fascinated, unwilling to miss a line of the tragedy unraveling. Camilla tore off her veil and flung it at the floor. Mascara carved black rivers down her cheeks. "You think you've won," she shrieked, "but we still have witnesses. We'll take you to court. We'll prove you're senile, vindictive, unfit." "Enough," Mr. Doyle barked from the doorway, his fisherman's voice cutting clean. "We've all seen who's fit and who isn't. Fit to strike, fit to scheme, fit to bleed a mother dry, and we've seen who's fit to stand." Applause broke, hesitant, then swelling. Not celebration applause, but recognition. Women nodded, men muttered agreement. The tide shifted, and I felt it in my bones. Still, I knew Camilla wasn't bluffing about court. The guardianship papers in my hand glowed like live coals. Their fight had only begun. I leaned into the microphone one last time. To every woman here who has ever been told she's too old, too fragile, too selfish, remember this night. Dignity is not gifted, it is defended. I handed the microphone back to Silas. The weight in my hand lifted, but the echo of my words remained. As we turned toward the doors, I heard Camilla's final shriek follow me. "This isn't over." "No," I thought, gripping the folder tighter. "It's only begun." The night ended, not with music, but with the scrape of chairs and the hush of shoes against polished wood. Guests scattered into the September air, their faces caught between pity and fascination. The Maple Harbor Community Hall, decorated with strings of fairy lights and rented hydrangeas, smelled less like celebration now and more like smoke after a fire. Camilla sat on the floor in her crumpled gown, mascara streaking, hands gripping her temples as if the truth itself were too heavy. Raphael hovered beside her, his head bowed, his tie wilted like an old ribbon. I walked out with Silas and Maya, the brown folder tucked under my arm. Every step echoed on the wooden porch. Mr. Doyle kept close, shoulders squared like a guard dog. When the cool night air wrapped around me, I realized I had been holding my breath inside the hall. "Lydia," Silas murmured, opening the passenger door of his car for me. "This isn't finished. They will come at you with claws. Are you ready?" "Ready," I said, voice steady as the harbor tide. "Let them try." The very next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. The caller ID glowed unknown. I answered anyway. "Consider this your warning," Camilla's voice rasped, stripped of its bridal sweetness. "You embarrassed us in front of the whole town. You think waving papers makes you powerful? We'll show the court what you really are, senile, vindictive, dangerous. Everyone saw your meltdown. We have witnesses. We'll take everything." I listened in silence, letting her venom curl into the receiver like smoke. When she finally paused for air, I said only, "Everything is exactly what you've already lost." And I hung up. 3 days later, Silas placed a manila envelope on my kitchen table. He didn't need to explain. The heading was bold enough: Petition for guardianship of an alleged incapacitated adult. Petitioner, Raphael Avila. Attached were sworn statements. Mrs. Portman claimed I'd shouted incoherently at the wedding. Young Daniel insisted I seemed confused when presented with documents. A cousin of Camilla's swore I had exhibited paranoid behavior about my apartment. Each testimony painted me as a fragile relic in need of control. The signatures gleamed like daggers. My hands trembled, not with fear but with fury. "They've coached them," I said. "They've turned gossip into weapons." Silas nodded grimly. "This is their plan B. But we'll counter with evidence." Evidence arrived in the most unexpected way. That same week, Joseph Doyle shuffled into my apartment, his fisherman's sweater smelling faintly of salt. He held up his phone, squinting at the screen. "You're famous, Lydia." "What do you mean?" He tapped play. On his cracked phone screen, grainy video footage began, Camilla's hand whipping across my cheek, my glasses flying, the stunned silence of the hall. The caption read, "Bride slaps elderly mother-in-law at her own wedding. Views, 24,000. Comments, hundreds." "Another video," Joseph said, swiping. This one showed Silas reading the financial documents, the guests gasping. Caption: "The truth unveiled at Maple Harbor wedding. Views, 83,000. I covered my mouth. "People recorded everything?" "Of course," Joseph chuckled bitterly. "You can't even sneeze in public without someone filming. Lucky for you, this time the truth made better theater than their lies." We scrolled the comments. Women wrote about their own families, their own humiliations, their own greedy children. Men called me courageous, said they wished their mothers had fought back. The tide of public opinion swelled in my favor, a tide Camilla and Raphael hadn't anticipated. The first hearing took place in the Maple County Courthouse, a brick building with ivy climbing its walls and pigeons nesting above the columns. I wore my navy dress, the one Miguel had always said made my eyes fierce. My glasses had been repaired, the frame still crooked, but the lens whole. Camilla entered in tailored beige, hair slicked into a bun tight enough to pull her smile. Raphael followed, shoulders slumped, eyes shadowed. Their lawyer, a slick man from Portland, carried a stack of papers thick as a Bible. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Justice Morales, regarded me with a level gaze that neither pitied nor dismissed. That neutrality alone gave me strength. Camilla's lawyer began with syrup. "Your Honor, our clients simply seek the well-being of Mrs. Avila. Her erratic behavior at a public event raised concern. Multiple witnesses attest to confusion, emotional instability, and financial irresponsibility." He laid the sworn statements before the bench as though they were gospel. Silas rose slowly, smoothing his jacket. "Your Honor, we contest every word. What occurred at that wedding was not confusion but clarity. Clarity born of abuse, manipulation, and public assault." He lifted a tablet. "And we have video evidence." The courtroom screen flickered. The footage of Camilla's slap played in front of everyone. Gasps rippled through the benches. Camilla's lawyer leapt to object, but Justice Morales raised a hand. "Overruled. I'll see this." The video continued. My glasses breaking, Camilla sneering, Silas reading financial documents, the crowd murmuring. Truth painted itself with pixels no affidavit could erase. When it ended, silence filled the courtroom. Even Raphael wouldn't meet my eyes. Justice Morales tapped her pen. "It appears, Counselor, that your witnesses failed to mention the initial assault." Camilla flushed scarlet. "It was provocation." "Enough," the judge snapped. Silas approached the bench with calm precision. "Additionally, Your Honor, medical records confirm Mrs. Avila's sound health and cognition. Independent evaluations show no decline in mental faculties. On the contrary, she demonstrates above-average capacity for her age. This petition is not protection, it is predation." The judge nodded once, slowly. "I will review the evidence and return with a ruling." We left the courthouse into a wall of flashing cameras. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward. For the first time, I didn't shy from them. I looked straight into the nearest lens and said, "This isn't about wealth. This is about dignity. No child, no spouse, no stranger has the right to strip that away." The clip aired on the evening news. By morning, it had been shared tens of thousands of times. That night, exhaustion pressed me into my armchair. My cheek still tingled with the ghost of the slap, as if memory branded the skin. The phone buzzed on the table. A message from Camilla. "Congratulations on your little performance, but you don't know everything. I'm pregnant. Think carefully about whether you want your grandchild to grow up poor and ashamed because of you." My stomach clenched. The words blurred. Pregnant. A grandchild I'd never seen. Another life tangled in this web of greed. I closed my eyes, pressing my hands together until the knuckles ached. Was it true? Or another manipulation? I heard Miguel's voice as if carried on the harbor wind. "Ballast. Lydia, hold steady." I reopened my eyes. The phone still glowed with Camilla's message. My answer would shape everything that came next. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and old paper, the kind of scent that clings to truth whether we want it or not. I sat at the long oak table with Silas at my side, the brown folder in front of me like a shield. My hands rested calmly, though inside my chest a storm pressed against its cage. Across the aisle, Camilla whispered furiously into Raphael's ear. Her hair was twisted into a severe knot, but wisps had escaped. framing her like a fighter coming undone. Raphael looked thinner than I remembered. Shadows bruised his eyes, but he still wouldn't look at me. The judge, Justice Morales, entered with a rustle of black robes. Her gaze swept the room like a lighthouse beam, steady, unblinking, exposing every corner. "Today," she began, "we hear the petition for guardianship over Mrs. Lydia Avila." She adjusted her glasses. "Let us proceed." Camilla's lawyer stood, smooth as oil. He painted me as erratic, fragile, unfit to manage my own affairs. He quoted witness statements, the Portmans, young Daniel, all claiming I had lost my faculties. He called me a widow in decline, as if the words themselves could make me crumble. But I didn't crumble. I sat upright, eyes clear, spine like iron forged from every humiliation endured. When he finished, Silas rose with deliberate patience. "Your Honor, words can be twisted, but facts do not bend so easily." He lifted a tablet. "This court will now see video evidence recorded by multiple witnesses at the wedding." The screen flickered to life. There it was again, Camilla's hand slapping my cheek. The sharp sound, my glasses breaking, skidding across the hall floor. Her voice, "A woman your age doesn't need so much space." The courtroom gasped in unison. Then the second video, Silas reading the documents aloud, the guests murmuring in shock, Camilla shrieking, Raphael shrinking, my voice steadying. Evidence preserved by strangers with phones, now stronger than any affidavit. When the screen went black, silence roared louder than applause ever could. The judge's voice was low but firm. "Mrs. Brooks," she said to Camilla, "why did your witnesses omit this?" Camilla stammered. It wasn't relevant." Justice Morales's eyes narrowed. "On the contrary, it is central. Your so-called evidence is incomplete, perhaps deliberately misleading." Raphael shifted in his seat, color draining. He whispered something to Camilla, but she shook her head violently, eyes blazing. Silas stepped forward again. "In addition, Your Honor, here are medical records confirming Mrs. Avila's cognitive health. She has undergone independent evaluations within the past 6 months. Memory, reasoning, problem-solving, all above average for her age. The petition claims incompetency. The evidence proves otherwise. This case is not guardianship. It is greed." The judge leaned back, tapping her pen against the bench. "I have heard enough. Petition denied." She paused, her gaze piercing Raphael. "Furthermore, I find this filing frivolous and malicious. Petitioners will pay respondents' legal fees in full." Camilla gasped. A strangled sound like fabric tearing. Raphael slumped as though the words themselves were weights on his shoulders. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. My cheek tingled again, phantom pain mixing with fresh relief. After the ruling, reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. Microphones jutted like spears. Flashes seared my eyes. One voice broke through the din. "Mrs. Avila, what does justice feel like tonight?" I lifted my chin. "Justice feels like air after drowning. It feels like remembering your own name after someone tried to erase it." The clip aired that evening. By midnight, messages poured into my inbox from strangers across the country. Women in their 60s and 70s wrote, "I saw myself in you." Men confessed their regret for not defending their mothers when they had the chance. I was no longer just Lydia Avila. I had become a mirror for every woman silenced at her own family's table. That night, as I folded laundry in my quiet apartment, my phone buzzed. A new message from Camilla. "You may have won in court, but this isn't over. I'm carrying Raphael's child. Think about that when you sleep alone. Do you want your grandchild to grow up in poverty because of your pride?" I read it twice, 3 times. My chest ached, not from fear, not from her venom, but from the word grandchild. A child innocent of this war, pulled like rope between greed and dignity. I set the phone down and stared out at the harbor. Moonlight drew a silver path across the black water. I remembered Miguel's voice, steady as ever. Ballast, Lydia, hold steady. The next morning, I called Silas. I want to amend my will. A week later, in his office lined with law books, I signed my name at the bottom of new documents. First, Silas said, sliding the papers toward me, your estate. You've redirected the bulk of your assets, the Dock Street building, the investment accounts, to the Elder Justice Trust. Funds will support seniors facing financial exploitation. I nodded. Let my pain build someone else's shield. Second, he continued, the beach cabin. You've designated it to become a retreat center for women recovering from abuse. Excellent choice. I signed again. And third, he said, voice softening, your grandson. You've created an irrevocable trust in his name, administered by me as trustee, accessible only when he turns 18. Neither parent may touch it. My hand trembled as I signed this one. I whispered to the paper, as if the unborn child could hear, this is yours, little one, not theirs. Yours? Silas placed the pen down. It's done. You've protected him, even from his parents. Relief surged through me like tide returning to shore. The fallout came swiftly. Raphael lost his job when his employer discovered the viral videos. Camilla's fledgling image consultancy collapsed. Who hires a woman whose own image circulates as a cautionary tale? Debts closed in like wolves. They were evicted from their apartment, their luxury car repossessed. Meanwhile, letters and invitations arrived for me. Churches, senior centers, even universities asked me to speak. Tell your story, they said. Give others courage. For the first time in years, my days filled with purpose beyond survival. But one evening, as I brewed chamomile tea, the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Camila. It was Raphael. His voice cracked like old wood. Mom, he whispered, please, we have nothing left. Camilla's pregnant. She's sick with stress. We can't pay rent. I know I hurt you. I know, but help us, please. The kettle whistled behind me, shrill and unyielding. I turned it off, listening to silence instead. Raphael, I said slowly, the only way to fix what you broke is not with my money. It's with your choices. When you learn that, when you show me respect instead of desperation, we can speak again. Until then, my answer is no. I hung up before he could reply. My hand shook, but not with guilt, with finality. A month later, an envelope arrived, an invitation to appear on a national television program. They wanted me to tell my story, unfiltered, to millions. I laid the invitation on my kitchen table, beside the folder that had started it all, the same brown folder that had carried both my humiliation and my liberation. I traced the letters of my name, Lydia Avila. For the first time in years, I loved how it looked. The fight wasn't over, but I was no longer a woman hiding behind modest curtains. I was ballast. I was air. I was my own defender. And I would speak for myself and for every woman who had ever been slapped into silence. The television studio smelled of powder and hot cables, not roses and salt water like Maple Harbor. It was strange to think my life had shifted from a quiet apartment above Dock Street to a stage lined with cameras, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. I sat in the guest chair, smoothing the navy skirt I had worn to court, my palms damp against the fabric. A microphone was clipped to my blouse, a wire snaking down like a leash. But I wasn't leashed. Not anymore. Across from me sat Catherine Diaz, the journalist whose voice I'd heard for years through the evening news. Her eyes were warm but sharp. She knew how to cradle a story and carve it open at the same time. 30 seconds, a producer called. I inhaled. Ballast. Lydia. Hold steady. The red light blinked to life. Good evening, Catherine began, her tone grave but inviting. Tonight on Stories of a Lifetime, we bring you the account that has swept the nation. A woman humiliated at her own son's wedding, who fought back, not with bitterness, but with truth. Please welcome Mrs. Lydia Avila. Applause rose from the studio audience, polite but real. I smiled, not the forced smile of family dinners, but the steady one that had returned after years of absence. Mrs. Avila, Catherine said, millions have watched the videos of that night. 6 months later, what does it feel like to sit here and tell your story to the country? I leaned forward, microphone catching the tremor in my throat. It feels like breathing air after years of holding it in. For so long, I thought my silence was love. But silence only fed their greed. Speaking is what saved me. Her eyes softened. Let's go back. When did you first realize your son and daughter-in-law wanted more than your blessing? I told her about the first dinner, Camilla's disdain for my worn sofa, the questions about my pension asked with syruped cruelty. I spoke of the real estate brochures scattered on my coffee table, of Raphael's voice echoing Camilla's words like a ventriloquist's doll. Each detail pulled gasps from the audience, nods of recognition from women who had lived similar evenings in their own kitchens. Catherine tilted her head. And the slap. Take us to that moment. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling again the sting, the shatter of glass on the ballroom floor. That slap was not just flesh against flesh. It was every small humiliation, every whispered insult, every look that said I was already buried. In that moment, I knew silence had become complicity, and I refused to be complicit in my own erasure. The audience broke into applause, not scripted this time. I saw women wiping tears, men bowing their heads. Halfway through the interview, Catherine invited Silas onto the stage. He explained the legal steps, how Raphael and Camilla had tried to declare me incompetent, how video evidence saved me. His calm voice turned my story into law, my humiliation into precedent. Then Catherine turned back to me. Mrs. Avila, the nation has seen your strength. But tell us, what happened after? Did you reconcile with your son? I looked directly at the camera, as if Raphael himself sat inside its glass eye. I love my son. I will always love him. But love without respect is chains, not wings. Until he learns the difference, I cannot open my door to him. Love is not the same as surrender. Silence filled the studio, the kind that holds more weight than applause. Catherine nodded. And now, what has become of your life since? I smiled then, not with bitterness, but with new purpose. I used part of my estate to found the Avila Foundation for Senior Justice. We provide legal aid, counseling, and community support for older adults facing family exploitation. In the last 3 months alone, we've helped more than 50 people reclaim their homes, their savings, their dignity. The audience erupted. I saw women clasping hands, whispering prayers of thanks. After the show, as lights dimmed and technicians unclipped microphones, strangers from the audience rushed to me. An elderly man pressed my hand and whispered, "My daughter stole my pension." "You've given me courage." A woman kissed my cheek, saying, "Now I know I'm not alone." For the first time, my humiliation had become harvest. Pain transformed into seed, scattered into other lives. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Invitations poured in. Churches, senior centers, even the state capitol. My face appeared on magazine covers, the headline always some variation of "The Woman Who Said No." But fame wasn't my goal. Dignity was. At the Foundation's modest office, located in the old Dock Street building Miguel and I had once rented to fishermen, we began to receive daily calls. A grandmother whose son threatened to place her in a nursing home unless she signed over her farm. A widower whose daughter drained his savings under the guise of helping with bills. A couple tricked into selling their home to finance their son's business. Each story cracked my heart, but also hardened my resolve. We built a team, lawyers volunteering hours, social workers, even Joseph Doyle, who became our unofficial spokesman in town. If Lydia can fight back, he told anyone who'd listen, so can you. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope, the handwriting shaky but familiar. Raphael, mother. It began. Camilla left 2 weeks ago. She took the baby and half of what little we had. I don't know where she is. I don't know if she's coming back. I am lost. I know I failed you, but I don't know how to live now. Please, if you can't forgive me, at least tell me how to survive this shame. Tears blurred the words. My grandson, already born, already pulled into chaos. Raphael, stripped of the woman who had fueled his betrayal, left staring at the ruins of his choices. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk. Not answered. Not yet. Some silences are not cowardice. They are space for truth to ripen. Weeks later, at a community event, Catherine Diaz herself approached me again. She clasped my hands, her eyes shining. Lydia, your story has sparked something bigger. Lawmakers are drafting a bill for stronger protections against elder financial abuse. They want you to testify before the Senate committee. My knees nearly buckled. Me, a florist's widow from Maple Harbor, asked to stand before senators. But then I remembered Miguel's words, always ballast, always steady. And I nodded. I will go. Not for myself, but for every woman whose silence has been mistaken for surrender. That night, back on my balcony, I looked out at the harbor. The tide whispered against the docks, the same sound that had carried Miguel and me through decades. I thought of Raphael's letter, of the grandson I hadn't met, of the hundreds of letters now flooding the Foundation's mailbox. I whispered into the salt air, I am ballast, I am air. I am not done yet. The Senate hearing room didn't smell like justice. It smelled like furniture polish, recycled air, and old microphones, like a place that had learned to hold its breath. A brass clock stared down at us with the blunt honesty of tide tables. I sat at the witness table with a glass of water, my notes, and a smooth moonshell in my pocket, the one I picked up the morning Miguel proposed, still faintly smelling of salt when I press it to my nose. Staffers whispered in shoals. Cameras perched like patient herons. Senators filed in with folders, and the gate of people already late for the thing after this thing. The gavel struck wood, a sound that always makes me sit straighter. Mrs. Avila, the chair said, voice formal but not unfriendly. Thank you for being here. You have 5 minutes. 5 minutes to boil a life-to-bone broth. I adjusted my crooked glasses, the same pair that met a bride's palm, and leaned into the microphone. My name is Lydia Avila, I began, and last fall, at my son's wedding, his bride slapped me because I wouldn't hand her my apartment keys. A cough died somewhere behind me. That moment wasn't the first injury, only the first one someone filmed. The months before that were softer, and therefore sharper. Brochures slid across my coffee table. It's for your safety, they said, which is how theft introduces itself to the elderly it plans to love. Pen slowed. An aide stopped typing. They prepared a guardianship petition, I continued, with neighbors coached to misremember me. They called it care. It was capture. I gave them the plain sequence, video that refused to lie, a courtroom that finally looked, a judge who said frivolous and malicious, and the day I changed my will so my money stopped being bait and became ballast for others. We founded a clinic on Dock Street. We answer calls in the night from grandmothers who've learned there's a difference between loneliness and being cornered. We created checklists with big, bossy headings, say no before you're shaking, and passwords are not love. I let the smallest breath in. Predators rarely wear ski masks, I said. They wear engagement rings, church shoes, and family names. Several heads lifted as if pulled by the same string. So make it harder to weaponize guardianship and easier to unwind it. Require banks to flag patterns. $4,500 on the first of every month to a son who calls it a bonus is a pattern. Fund hotlines that bite back, give dignity teeth. I stopped at 4 minutes and 51 seconds on purpose and left 9 seconds of quiet. It sounded like respect. Questions came, some precise, some performance. I refused to be a prop. When a senator with a silver bob asked what I wanted most, I said, a paper trail that bites back. When a younger man asked if families could be trusted to take care of their own, I looked straight into the camera lens, the glass eye that always tells the truth, and said, the question isn't whether seniors can be trusted with their homes. The question is whether families can be trusted with their elders. The room held the sentence the way the harbor holds a buoy. The water can bump it, but the buoy doesn't move far. Afterward, a custodian pushing a cart of bottled water paused. My mother lost her house to my brother, he said, eyes low. I wish you'd been around. We're around now, I told him, my fingers warming the shell. Send her to us, or send yourself. The clip aired that night. 2 weeks later, the chair introduced a bill with audits, bank training, and penalties for coercive control. Lobbyists frowned. Grandmothers wrote on scented stationery. For once, the stationery won. 2 years have passed since lemon bars, silk ribbons, and the sharp sound of flesh on skin. I measure time differently now. By intake forms that end in relief, by red thumbtacks on a corkboard labeled kept, by how many times Mr. Doyle's hallway whistle announces another person who refuses to hand over keys. The Avila Foundation outgrew our single room above Dock Street. We kept it out of superstition and stubbornness, but added 2 more centers, one in a church basement where quilts soften walls, another in a former bait shop whose bell sings when frightened people enter and steadier people leave. Mondays we run, recognizing the script, which starts the same way it always starts. Someone reads, "It's for your own good," and we all groan because we know that line by heart. Tuesdays are legal triage, Silas at a scuffed table, sleeves rolled, explaining durable power of attorney to a retired lunch lady whose hands bend like old willow but whose eyes do not. Wednesdays, home visits. I brew tea until kitchens smell more like cinnamon than collapse. Thursdays, boundary rehearsal. Women practice saying no into another person's face without swallowing the word. The 6th time, it comes easier. By the 10th, it's a reflex. Fridays, we pin our victories. Mrs. G kept her farmhouse. Mr. Leon reclaimed his Social Security. A granddaughter returned $7,142 and apologized on video. The board looks like a bright rash of sanity. Not every ending is tidy. Some are restraining orders. Some are chairs left empty on holidays that used to be loud. But an empty chair is kinder than a seat reserved for a thief. My body joined the truce, my mind declared. Headaches receded. Sleep arrived like a well-trained dog and stayed. I eat oatmeal with pears and a shake of cinnamon because Miguel believed cinnamon fixes what can be fixed. At dawn, I walk the harbor path and count lobster traps stacked like patient prayers. Mr. Doyle, now our volunteer coordinator, lanyard he claims to hate, thumps files on my desk and says, "Turns out I was born to boss bullies." He whistles. The building answers. Maya moved next door. Fridays she teaches inheritance without war on a whiteboard, haunted by nouns, clarity, consent, consequence. She brings me lentil soup that could forgive a multitude of winters. Sometimes I sit alone in the armchair that survived 4 coffee floods and 1 courtroom tear. On the shelf above it, Miguel's carpentry pencil with tooth marks, a photo of me at the Senate table, wearing crooked glasses and an expression I recognized as my mother's, and a crayon portrait a 5-year-old handed me at our bait shop office. The child drew me with an orange crown. "You're the house queen," she said. I hung the crown where clients can see it on their way in. Queens aren't born, they practice, Letters still arrive addressed to the woman who said no. The envelopes are brave, crayon scrawl, stern cursive, block capitals. Inside, a copy of a deed, a restraining order, a recipe for cinnamon rolls, a paper flower folded from a utility bill that is gloriously paid. We frame some and line the hallway. When new clients arrive, we walk them through our little gallery of refusals. We don't worship pain, we worship the pivot. The beach cabin we deferred for decades now exists as feral retreat, lighthouse. We scraped flaking plaster, coaxed stubborn windows, taught old pipes to sing less and behave more. The small deck faces mornings. Women sit there wrapped in blankets and write to the girl they used to be. Dear me, we made it. We built a fire pit from stones our own hands lifted. The ash clings to sweaters like proof. Strangers still ask about Raphael. They will always ask. The answer depends on the day and the weather. He called 3 times in 2 years. The first, a month after court, when friends avoided his eyes and his boss avoided his projects. He asked for money and called it help. I said no. The second call came the week his son, my grandson, was born. He didn't tell me the baby's name. He told me Camilla wanted me to pay the hospital bill. I said no, and I put $20 in an envelope for the community pantry instead. The third call came after Camilla left. He said the apartment looked bigger without a crib, and the silence itched. He asked for rent just until I told him, try your knees first, and hung up. Then I cried the way a dam weeps at the seams, not because I doubted, but because certainty has weight. I haven't met my grandson. I know him the way tide knows the moon, by pull, not by touch. A friend of a friend sent me a blurred photo once, taken at a park. He has a dimple on the left cheek, not earned by Camilla's side of the family, and the right eyebrow that can't decide whether to sit straight or ask a question. Miguel's eyebrow, always curious. The hair at his crown swirls like a cowlick map. In the picture, he's tapping his toes in a rhythm no one taught him. Miguel used to drum his fingers on the table in that exact pattern when soup cooled. Each quarter, I ask Silas how the trust looks. Healthy, he says, and I picture a sapling behind a good fence. When the boy turns 18, I will hand him 2 things, a key to the Farol retreat and a stack of pages I've written in my own uneven hand, stains of coffee and seawater at the edges. The first sentence says, Dear boy I've never held. The last says, You owe me nothing. You owe yourself everything. If you came here for reconciliation, you may leave with reality instead. Reconciliation requires 2 hands. I held mine out until the skin went thin. Now I use it for other work, holding pens, teacups, trembling fingers that want to stop trembling, planting marigolds in the community garden behind Dock Street, marigolds that keep beetles at bay and remind me boundaries can be bright. On Sundays, I stand at the back of St. Bridget's and light a small candle for women whose names I will never learn. Women who learned to say no at 68, 72, 85. Wax slips onto my thumb. It stings just enough to keep me honest. After Mass, I walk to the pier and watch boys shoot a basketball toward a hoop that leans like an old man listening. When the ball slides through, the hollow clap sounds like a seal surfacing. I clap back. A few months ago, Catherine Diaz found me at a community fair and hugged me near a table where we were handing out folders labeled Keep Your Keys. Your clip changed votes, she whispered. Not just in a chamber, at dinner tables. If any of this brushes against your own kitchen table, if a relative is suddenly concerned about your capacity, if papers appear when no one invited them, if love comes with a ledger, come sit with us, tell your story. We'll hand you forms and cinnamon tea and a sentence to practice until it fits your mouth. And if this story steadied you even a little, leave a comment and subscribe so another woman finds her ballast when she most needs it. Stories travel farther than court summonses. As for Camilla, she photographs houses on the edge of town now. Her listings are all morning light and staged fruit, bowls of lemons on counters that will belong to someone else by closing. She never turns the lens toward the street, where the real story always waits. I wish her a long, ordinary life. I wish her the relief that comes when the last scheme finally runs out of gas. I wish her a son who tells her no at the right time and means it. Fridays end with Eileen, who brings oranges and asks me to say boundary like a prayer. We sit under a map of the harbor, and she practices, "No, I won't sign that." The first time she cried, the fifth she laughed. Now she says it the way you say good morning. Before she leaves, she always asks, "If you could change one thing about that night." I used to joke about taping my glasses tighter. Now I answer plain. I would have learned sooner that kindness without boundaries is consent. That's the lesson I carry and the one I hand to anyone who will take it. Respect is not a favor granted. It is a fence you build and maintain, a fence with a gate you control. Love without boundaries is a tide that never rests. It will eat every shoreline in your life. Choose dry ground. Choose your name. Choose the small, hard sentence that saves you. Night comes early on the coast. The lighthouse on the point sweeps its white arm across the water and sometimes across my wall. I don't chase it. Lighthouses don't chase boats. They cast their circle and let lost captains decide whether they want to live. I slide the moon shell from my pocket and set it beside the rosemary. The shell holds my heat a moment, then gives it back, a trade I can live with. If you're listening from a kitchen lit by a single lamp, hands folded over bills that arrive together like geese, know this: you are not alone and you are not late. There is a folder with your name on it at our bait shop office and a chair that fits your back. We'll practice the word until it belongs to you. When you leave, the bell will sing, and the door will close softly behind you. Some doors need to stay closed. That is not cruelty. That is shelter. I rinse my teacup and turn off the light. The harbor breathes, the clock ticks. The rosemary smells like good memory. Somewhere a boy I haven't met taps his toes against wood in a rhythm I recognize. The tide goes out. The tide comes in. My name stays.